The protagonist finally reaches the moment he'd been waiting for in life and seems pretty excited to really get started, but when he opens his eyes, he notices a completely strange ceiling and feels that his own body has changed entirely, and it doesn't matter if it was reincarnation or possession, because he finally managed to enter a fantasy world. The truth is that Kim-sun was just an ordinary Korean citizen who spent a long time preparing for this, spending years obsessively consuming every kind of book, web novel, webtoon, and game he could find, and the guy simply dedicated his entire life to analyzing in detail every single work he loved so much. And when I say analyzing, I mean massive text walls of nearly 6,000 characters filled with scathing criticism, because he didn't spare the authors and tore apart every story's plot, pointing out every possible narrative hole every single day, and without resting, our dear professional critic created new extremely thorough analyses, memorizing the worlds and the relationships between characters as if he were studying for the exam of his life, and he even knew the exact location of every secret item and relic hidden within those stories. But all that nagging of his came at a high price, and most authors simply gave up on continuing to write, so the poor guy ended up banned and hated by all the reader communities. But in the end his crazy plan worked out, because after bothering everyone so much, he was finally possessed and woke up directly in a child's body in another world. And now he has to take a good look around and figure out where this medieval setting actually ended up. Realizing he's at most about 5 years old, the little genius decides it's time to check his status window. So he strikes that classic anime protagonist pose and screams with all his might for his status screen, except an awkward silence takes over the room and absolutely nothing happens, much to the boy's despair, and he realizes his new journey won't be an easy cliché, but decides not to stress too much about it. After all, he remembers that many of the stories he criticized didn't even have that status system making things easier. The boy decides that the best path now is to use his modern knowledge to create something revolutionary and get rich, and so passes the first week of this new and incredible possession life with him still at the peak of his 4 years old. But reality hits hard when he discovers that his new name is now Ivan Petrovich and things don't seem so easy, and to make matters worse, his parents are just poor peasants who can't read and have no idea what country they live in. Thinking he'll revolutionize the market, he tries to make homemade soap, but all he manages is a nice explosion, and besides getting a good beating from his mother for playing with soda, he finds out the hard way that damn soap already existed there, and by the 6th week of possession, the boy realizes that the life of a revolutionary inventor won't be so simple. Everything changes when he goes to town to buy eggs, and suddenly several flying newspapers catch the young boy's attention, and he's intrigued because a society capable of printing and distributing newspapers can't just be an ordinary medieval era. So he starts crossing off several options from his list, desperately trying to figure out what kind of story he ended up in. And 15 weeks pass and he still doesn't quite understand the rules of this new confusing fantasy world. But the boy finally manages to discover the name of that country and also that it's the great king who rules those lands. Realizing that none of the options on the list made sense, he decides to burn that useless paper in the home fireplace once and for all, because everything there is completely bizarre and he finds himself surrounded by an unknown kingdom with neighbors he's never heard of. And now his big question is no longer which story he entered, but rather figuring out what the damn genre of this world is. 4 years fly by and now our protagonist is already a solid 8 years old in this place, and suddenly, peace ends completely with the dreaded emergence of the terrible demon king ravaging the world all at once. So the peasants panic and the boy's mother tries to calm him down, asking him to wait safely at home, while Ivan's father tries to reassure the family, promising he'll be back soon as the imperial soldiers approach. But the man ends up being forcibly taken by recruitment officers to fight in that terrible endless war, and it was precisely from that tragic moment that Kim-sun's mind began to crack and go off the rails for good. 6 years pass in this bitter possession with the boy now reaching his 10 years of age and much more mature, and Ivan starts constantly helping his mother, doing heavy farm work very skillfully and without complaining, and time keeps passing relentlessly and now he has completed 8 years living in this strange alternate world. So the young man uses all his free time to study hard and finally manages to master the complex writing of that kingdom. 10 long years have passed since he reincarnated, and now the young man is already a full 14 years old, but a terrible shadow of sadness looms over the humble family cabin, bringing unpleasant news for the young man, as the dreaded official notice of his father's death is finally delivered into his hands, ending any hope of reunion. And the worst part is that that death certificate had actually been issued by the government over 2 years ago, so Ivan becomes outraged and understands nothing, wondering if after all the genre of this world is a damn strategy game. Ivan realizes he's in a crazy isekai that mixes gunpowder, steam engines, slice of life, magic, and a demon king at war, and the poor guy is completely incredulous and pale upon noticing the huge, senseless mess he's gotten himself into, and to make matters worse, his mother starts crying desperately over all this terrible misfortune in the family, so seeing her suffering, the boy wonders how things could have gone so wrong right at the start of his journey, and he tries to comfort the poor woman, assuring her everything will be fine, and the next day makes a drastic decision for his life. Young Ivan simply decides to enlist in the army and heads to the train station to begin his military service, and he makes a deal to receive an annual salary of 15 coins and has all the money transferred directly to his mother, and the boy doesn't do this just out of kindness, but because he feels great pity for that woman who gave her life for him in the fields, and besides that, he felt tremendous guilt for having possessed her son's body, who was her only source of support. Time passes very quickly, and now he is 18 years old with 4 long years faithfully serving in the army, and during this time, he surprisingly realizes that his new body has a natural and frightening talent for fighting in war, and after achieving several incredible feats in combat, he finally stops being a mere recruit and becomes an official soldier. Only the front line ends up being brutally pushed back, and half of the Allied forces are destroyed in the middle of the fire, and right when everything seemed completely lost, the legendary golden-armored hero appeared to save the day. Upon seeing the hero and his party, Ivan finally thinks he understands the genre of that world and believes he's in a classic RPG game, and the arrival of the legendary warrior brings a glimmer of hope. But the front line where Ivan is stationed continues to be massacred, and the soldiers keep retreating desperately as they face giant worms and monsters on the battlefield. But a big time skip happens, and now our protagonist is already 28 years old and very battle-hardened, and the war situation finally begins to change when the hero's party pulls off a perfect ambush against the enemy generals, and thanks to his excellent military results, Ivan manages to earn the right to fight alongside the hero's party itself, and with this prominence, he is placed in a very important special squadron focused on region control and enemy suppression, and to shorten that enormous name, everyone knew that deadly group simply as the Extermination Unit, because they were sent in to clean up whenever the hero's party killed a commander and left the camp in chaos. And so another 2 years pass with our dear protagonist, completing 30 years of life and 16 in the army, and the most anticipated moment finally arrives when the hero's party manages to defeat the feared Demon King once and for all. So Ivan then decides to just watch the victory parade from the stands, eagerly awaiting the final credits of his journey, and with a serious and determined expression, he prepares to finally return to his old and beloved life on Earth. Time passes, and at 32 years old he believes he's about to escape that terrible fantasy world, but to his total disappointment, 2 years have passed since the Demon King's death and absolutely no game ending happens, and to make his situation worse, the numbers of his extermination unit have been reduced to only 1/5 of the original force. So Ivan keeps fighting tooth and nail in the middle of the bloodshed, not knowing if that endless slaughter will ever end. Realizing that his superiors wanted to disband the group, he accepted one last suicide mission before finally being discharged, and he survives that true death squad by pure miracle and ends up with his face completely covered in blood and hatred. And now at 34 years old, he keeps waiting for this extremely long and tiring epilogue to finally come to an end. But it's been 10 years since his dear peasant mother passed away, and he finds himself completely alone and aimless in that fantasy kingdom. With nowhere else to go, the warrior decides to return to his old hometown, carrying only a single suitcase, and Ivan decides to found an orphanage near the capital and starts gathering several children who lost their parents because of the war. But even doing this good deed, the protagonist keeps anxiously waiting for the moment when he can finally leave that place, and despite the children having fun at the new orphanage, the final credits of that damned story still show no signs of appearing. Already with a big beard and a grumpy face, Ivan just lets out a discouraged sigh in his home library and starts writing a diary revealing that he feels an absurd longing for his old routine in the modern world. And the poor guy even makes a list of the foods he wants to devour when he returns, including French fries, stew, and plenty of drinks. And he despairs upon noticing that the Demon King died 4 years ago and hopes that the game's ending isn't the hero dying of old age. Suddenly, heavy and firm footsteps begin to echo through the hallway, catching the attention of our favorite war veteran, and Ivan immediately becomes alert in his armchair upon realizing that someone strange is approaching his sanctuary, so he focuses all his attention on that strange noise, trying to identify who would invade the place like that. And from the sound of creaking leather, the smell of gunpowder, and the rhythm of the steps, he deduces that it's just a very well-trained soldier. And without wasting time, the protagonist draws his sharp weapons and prepares to welcome the unwanted intruder. The room door begins to open slowly, letting out a tense creak that makes the atmosphere even heavier in that room. But who appears is a young officer, all smiles, saluting and greeting his old combat veteran, and Ivan points his weapon and complains that he should have knocked first, while the young officer finds his ugly beard strange. So the veteran just closes his eyes and says with all seriousness that he came there only to handle important business. Dmitri hands over a mysterious sealed letter and jokes that the veteran is too impatient and won't even let him sit down to rest, and he asks Ivan to open the envelope right away, explaining that it's a private message sent directly by the princess herself. And the officer jokes, asking if the letter is poisoned, and insists that his friend open it to see how the nobility is doing. But he becomes thoughtful upon hearing about the princess and wonders what that important woman truly wants with it. Simple soldier, after all. The fearsome Elizabeta would never send a handwritten letter just to ask how he's been doing. Dmitri says that the political situation is absurdly tense and that the military administration demands troop withdrawals every single day, and to make matters worse, the ambitious Crown Prince Alexander is trying to split the kingdom into 5 different pieces to sell everything off, and while chaos consumes the country, the king everyone called the great leader simply keeps sitting without saying a single word. But in the middle of this mess, an intriguing piece of news emerges about the famous and prestigious academy founded right after that war ended. So the officer presents Senisk University and asks if his friend has any idea who the standout new freshmen are this year. The first freshman presented is young Isabel, who is none other than the proud daughter of the legendary hero Maximilian. Next we have the intimidating powerhouse Oscar, the heir of the fearless knight Giles de Rice, ready to prove his worth. Then we also have the intelligent Euphira, who carries the prestige of being the daughter of the powerful mage Breen in this new academic year. And to round out the group of prodigies, arrive Dizza, daughter of the furious berserker, and Lucia, the young disciple of the rogue Enrique. And to command this crew of heroes' children, the saint herself from the old heroes party took over as department head. With such a prestigious school, there's no minimum age requirement, and the most talented and promising youths in the world prepared from an early age to get in, and the officer explains with great concern that if any of these important children end up getting hurt or dying, things will get really bad, because if a single heir dies, the entire country will be completely ruined. So Ivan immediately asks what exactly he needs to do. And Dmitri explains simply that his main goal is to protect all those young people from any danger for 3 years. The veteran becomes extremely outraged upon realizing what kind of senseless mess the ending of that hero's story had become, and he curses this complicated political finale and rebels against the sudden appearance of this damned academy in the middle of nowhere. But suddenly, a terrible suspicion arises in Ivan's mind, and he makes an absolutely shocked face as he connects the dots of the story. So the protagonist asks for a moment to think while feeling his eye twitch in the face of that terrible and bizarre revelation, and then he slams both hands on the table with so much rage and indignation that a red aura of pure hatred begins to emanate from his entire body, and the warrior lets out a curse with all his strength while the young officer just stares without understanding anything, because he finally realizes that the story he reincarnated into was actually always a damn cliché academy romance with students. Dmitri takes a step back, startled by his friend's sudden fury, and asks if he's feeling okay, but Ivan is outraged for having fought in terrible wars for 30 years only to find out that all of that was just the story's prologue, and he breaks the table with a violent punch of pure frustration upon realizing he's been so humiliatingly deceived all this time. But soon he opens a macabre smile and decides that he just needs to ensure these brats graduate to finally reach his ending, so Ivan accepts the mission, declaring that he will follow the princess's orders and promises himself that his ending will finally bring him back home. The princess's letter continues narrating that she heard rumors about his good life and affectionately asks how her old friend is doing, and she fondly recalls the time they tended the garden together and complains that he left without even looking back for a farewell, and the noblewoman warns that winter is approaching again and that this time the cold season promises to be even harsher and quieter than the last. And while walking thoughtfully, she gently touches the plant leaves, showing great melancholy over the warrior's absence. The princess praises the young man, calling him her most trusted lumberjack in the kingdom as she walks alone through the frozen garden, and she promises to pay triple any wish he has or else repay all his effort with sincere friendship. And if even then the debt isn't fully paid, she guarantees she's willing to pay with their own shared memories, and the beautiful ruler states with absolute certainty that the kingdom still needs his devotion, just as it always has in the past, and she signs the letter with great affection, and the protagonist finishes reading by mentally summarizing all her poetic rambling. The main goal now is to ensure that none of those important children die or get hurt during the 3 school years, and the young man resigns himself to the academy genre and calculates that he just needs to endure 3 more years of babysitting to finally return to Earth. And sitting on the sofa, he asks who the first freshman will be and finds out that Einar's daughter is already on her way to the prestigious school. Upon hearing the girl's father's name, Ivan immediately tenses up and remembers many details about that extremely problematic warrior, because although he's now known as the Great King of Drone, the man was just a savage barbarian who was part of the old heroes party, and Ivan remembers laughing at that lunatic shouting and scandalously showing off how he wielded a battle axe in the middle of the carnage. And to our protagonist's total despair, the first problematic student about to arrive at that military school is precisely the one bringing the air of that completely crazy and savage warrior to start all the story's chaos. The barbarians of the Drone Kingdom proudly celebrate and say that the young woman inherited the blood of the conqueror to dominate everything, and they joke about what she will dominate and find out that the girl is leaving to conquer the world of orchestral music, and young Zaidi's appears with a violin case on her back and shouts in outrage asking what's wrong with music. And she enters proudly into the music department of Seninsk University, promising everyone she will have resounding success. The Order of Knights of Drone gives a big send-off, and just 2 days after her departure, the train she's traveling on continues on its way, but as with any good fantasy story cliché, the train violently derails in the middle of the mountains in a huge explosion, and in the meeting room, Dmitri is shocked by the information and asks the protagonist if he's sure there will be an attack. But Ivan replies coldly that he's absolutely certain, because this is the most common and obligatory cliché in every military academy story. He recalls the old rules from the books, where the hero always defeats the demon king with the help of his faithful and brave companions, where even one of the evil generals ends up switching sides midway to support the hero against the dark forces, and that at the end of all that tiring journey, peace finally returns to the world, with all those rules being nothing but clichés. And the veteran knows that every literary genre has its own common sense and starts pulling from memory the rules of the book he burned. So he tries to remember the details of that story he himself destroyed in the bonfire 30 years ago to anticipate the enemies, and Ivan easily deduces that a terrorist attack on the train carrying the new students at Gorvat Station is the common sense of the work. Thinking about this, our professional critic goes to that station and calmly reads the newspaper while waiting for the action to begin, and with just a few minutes left before the Drone Air's train arrives, he checks his wristwatch knowing the danger is very close, and the young man knows that if someone were planning an ambush against the girl, the best place would be precisely that border station, because crossing that border transfers all responsibility to the kingdom. Besides being an extremely protected military area, And without evidence to call for reinforcements, he decides to act on his own and notices that the enemy's secret security is incredibly amateurish, so he calmly walks into the station's main hall, carefully observing every suspicious detail around him. Ivan focuses his gaze on a seated man pretending to read the train schedules, but who had already let 3 departures pass by, and the other accomplice disguised as a vegetable vendor was even more ridiculous, trying to sell onions in the middle of an empty station. So the veteran silently walks behind the man sitting on the wooden bench, moving with the precision of a professional assassin, and noticing a shadow approaching, the man quickly turns around with an expression of absolute shock and wide eyes. But before he could make any move, Ivan draws his pistol and coldly aims at the frightened man's neck. The accomplice tries to react in anger and asks what the protagonist thinks he's doing with that weapon to his head, but the veteran tells the man to shut up immediately, maintaining an icy gaze and showing no hesitation in shooting him, and the fake onion vendor notices the commotion and shouts desperately, telling Ivan to stop what he's doing and freeze. But Ivan finds that reaction ridiculous because his weapon was at an angle completely invisible to anyone watching from outside the bench. So the protagonist turns around with weapon in hand and coldly asks where those men's true loyalty lies. The hostage tries to play dumb and stammers desperately, pretending not to know what the veteran is talking about, but losing patience with lies, Ivan simply pulls the trigger and blows the hostage's head off in the middle of that train station concourse, and he drops the lifeless body to the floor while the other accomplice stands completely paralyzed with horror at such brutality, and the young man concludes that they aren't loyal agents, since professionals would have identified themselves. Instead of questioning his authority, the fake vendor draws his pistol with hatred and shouts desperately, ordering another accomplice to shoot that damn monster, but Ivan moves with absurd speed and dodges the shots easily, concluding that the enemies are extremely clumsy, and the 2 terrorists try to shoot back desperately, but miss every shot against their experienced warrior. So the protagonist appears like a blur in front of them and cuts down the enemies with his sharp weapon in an incredibly fast and lethal way, leaping over tables and finishing off the second terrorist with a devastating blow that gives the target no chance to defend. Ivan defeats the criminals in just a few seconds, doing a thorough cleanup of the concourse and leaving a trail of destruction and blood, and the young man looks with disdain at the fallen bodies and thinks that these amateurs clearly never faced a real warrior in their lives, and the surviving terrorist screams in pure pain and despair on the ground upon realizing that his arm was completely severed by the strike. So Ivan warns coldly that if he doesn't stop that terrible bleeding, he'll die. Right there in less than 3 minutes. And the hero approaches with his blood-stained black overcoat and asks intimidatingly, "Where are your other companions?" The criminal cries in panic and reveals that there are 15 more men on the tracks, begging for his life in exchange for cooperation, and he tries to negotiate saying their boss is a terrible monster, and Ivan concludes that this group was just the scout unit, and the survivor desperately confirms this, and the protagonist asks if they know exactly who the passenger on that drone train is, and the man cries in pain and reveals that the boss said the train was carrying only gold and valuable goods from the kingdom. Ivan begins to coldly walk away, and the wounded man screams, desperately asking if he'll really spare his life after the confession, but the veteran turns around with an icy gaze and replies that he won't spare him because there was clearly a lie in that testimony, and Ivan finishes off the terrorist without mercy and says coldly that his lie was precisely the part where he said he would be useful. The station clock reads exactly 9:53 in the morning, and the time for the attack is running out, and the young man calmly cleans the blood from his gloves, knowing that an elite agent only needs 5 minutes to deal with the bodies, and after the complete cleanup in the concourse, only 2 minutes of advantage remain before the train with the barbarian's daughter finally arrives. So Ivan adjusts his coat with great composure and thinks to himself that this time is more than enough for him to prepare for action. Far away in the imperial palace, the princess begins to question her subordinate about how her dear Van is doing, and the officer reports that the veteran suspects an imminent attack on the admissions train and that he was very specific about the date and location. But the princess denies that Ivan has any secret informant, pointing out that there hasn't been any suspicious activity in the last 4 years. And Dmitri lets out a nervous and sweaty laugh, not quite sure how to react to all that strange obsession from his superior, So she authoritatively demands that every single step and action of Ivan be properly recorded and delivered directly to her, and the beautiful ruler wants to analyze the reports at any moment, demonstrating all her cold personality as an iron-blooded princess, and with a penetrating gaze. She notices that he remains exactly the same as when he left for his last war mission. The princess feels great conviction in the soldier's actions while the drone train speeds forward over a bridge, and meanwhile, hidden in the snow, a terrorist holds a red detonator with absolute certainty that his plan will work, while Ivan sprints through the frozen forest, remembering the rules and common sense that govern academy romance books, because he knows very well that a train attack would never actually hurt the main characters and certainly not the protagonist, and the veteran concludes that this explosion on the train line before school admission is actually nothing more than the classic game tutorial, and he knows the tutorial only serves for newcomers to adapt to combat, so he has no intention of stopping the explosion. The terrorist on the tracks presses the red button without thinking twice, initiating the chaos planned by his mercenary group, and the bomb explodes with devastating force, destroying the tracks and making the train spectacularly derail in the snow. So Ivan leaves the tutorial for the protagonist to handle and decides to use this opportunity to discover who's behind the attack. And the terrorist leader gives a thumbs up celebrating the explosion while our hero approaches stealthily, planning to discover the identity of that rebel group to eliminate them all easily later at the school, and he prefers to act in the shadows, doing intelligence work in the rear to avoid an open war against the army, because his total priority is to exterminate any threat factor silently and efficiently to guarantee the story's ending. He draws his pistol and aims with precision, acting in exactly the ruthless way his old extermination unit operated, while the train car burns intensely on the destroyed tracks, raising a huge column of black smoke in the middle of the mountains, and the terrorists celebrate the successful derailment, shouting noisily that they are now rich with the loot from that cargo, and the boss orders them to melt the royal seal from the explosives and sell everything on the black market, demanding haste to clean up the crime scene. Suddenly, a precise shot rings through the snow and hits one of the mercenaries in the head by surprise, putting the others on alert, and another accurate shot pierces the chest of the second accomplice, who lets out a groan of pain before falling dead on the frozen ground, and the veteran thinks that only the weak are frightened by the sound of gunfire, because true warriors act coldly in combat, and the bald mercenary shouts furiously asking who the mysterious shooter is while Ivan analyzes the group's slow reaction, and from the enemy's frightened reaction, he immediately realizes that none of those amateurs can predict the trajectory of the shots. Ivan emerges in the middle of the blizzard, holding a pistol and a battle axe, calmly asking who the leader of that band is, and the terrorists fall into despair upon seeing the warrior and start shooting frantically in his direction, trying to kill him, but the hero focuses his gaze and activates his special ability, his eyes glowing gold to track the exact trajectory of the bullets, and with his line of fire perception, he can see the beams of light indicating the path of each projectile fired at him, and the young man knows that firearms are useless against elite warriors because they can sense the killing intent of the weapon. So Ivan dodges the shots with agile and elegant movements, predicting each projectile thanks to his battle instinct. He knows that in a normal person it's easy to erase killing intent from handheld weapons, but doing it with projectiles is very difficult, and that's why none of the elite warriors from the hero's party used pistols, always preferring hand-to-hand combat. However, the soldiers of the extermination unit were the great exception and all carried pistols to facilitate combat, so he fires at another mercenary's head, using the firearms to test the enemy's level of strength and skill, and this was the standard tactic the veteran used to quickly eliminate the weaker ones before facing the true leader. The mercenary boss becomes enraged and draws his daggers, running toward the protagonist to try to slice him up for good, and he attacks with several rapid strikes and asks angrily who sent that damned soldier to interfere with the group's plans, but the veteran easily blocks the attacks with his axe and lands a violent punch to the boss's face that makes him spit blood, and then Ivan immobilizes the opponent's weapon with a perfect arm lock and throws the brute with all his force to the ground. So the terrorist leader is brutally thrown, creating a crater in the snow, while the protagonist stares him down threateningly. The mercenary leader on the ground grumbles in pain as Ivan slowly approaches, and the villain says angrily that he's etched Ivan's face into his memory while a mysterious voice questions him about it, and Ivan appears imposingly, holding his weapons, and replies that this is great luck, and the mercenary is in shock and the soldier realizes that this guy is probably the tutorial boss, so Ivan focuses on his axe, knowing he shouldn't kill the opponent because he belongs to the protagonist. He points his weapon and warns that he knows countless ways to torture someone without ruining their functions, and elsewhere, the young redhead desperately warns anyone not to try to follow her, furiously saying she will immediately disinherit anyone who dares to go after her, and she sets off with her instrument while the barbarian king watches his niece's departure with concern. The king has a brilliant idea and thinks there will be no problem if she just doesn't find out. So he gathers all his strong warriors in the Great Hall to explain the emergency situation and asks out loud, who will be the warrior who protects the girl without being noticed? And the men shout enthusiastically, volunteering for the secret escort mission. Because these warriors were once bloodthirsty lunatics, but now they are like brothers to the kingdom. The king remembers that his niece knows everyone's face and would recognize them even disguised on the train, so he then asks who would be capable of chasing the train on foot without rest, and the soldiers shout again with fervor, wanting only to demonstrate their absolute loyalty to the leader, and in Drone, these elite warriors extremely loyal to the Jarl are known as housecarls. The king decides he needs to choose someone to enroll in the university and protect Zydais, but all the warriors freeze when he asks who can guarantee themselves in written tests, because they are terrified, thinking that a written test is impossible and they prefer death to doing it, and suddenly, a brave warrior raises his hand, volunteering for the terrible challenge, and it's the warrior Mark Eriksson, who bows before his Jarl, accepting the academic mission, and his comrades cry with emotion, and try to comfort him, saying the test can't be that hard. The king celebrates his courage and officially appoints him as the new physical education freshman, and the warrior leaves with determination, swearing he will protect young Zydais with his own life, and 2 months earlier, this rugged man managed to secretly infiltrate the prestigious academy, and against all expectations, he passed the entrance exam and entered the sports department. But obviously his written test was a complete disaster and he barely scraped by with the minimum grade, and the institution's evaluators were completely shocked by the young man's intellectual level, but admission was guaranteed because he broke absolutely every record in the practical portion, because after all, he's a true housecarl and his legendary physical endurance is far above normal. In January, this new student ran alongside a train for 2 days straight without stopping to sleep, and he runs furiously, shouting for Zydais to hold on and threatening any damn fools who touch her, and inside the derailed train, someone begins to regain consciousness with a groan of great pain, and Zydais sits up dizzily in the middle of the chaotic wreckage, wondering what just happened there, and she gets scared upon realizing the train was attacked and fears that dangerous bandits might be nearby, and the redhead falls into despair upon remembering she traveled alone and forbade any guards from following. Suddenly, she spots her instrument case in the middle of the destroyed car and runs to it, hugging her violin, relieved, grateful it didn't break in that terrible accident. But her peace doesn't last long when a loud, sudden noise startles the young woman, and in the middle of the smoke, the car door is violently kicked open, making the girl scream in pure fright, and she cowers terrified in the corner of the car, clutching her violin with trembling hands, while a sinister laugh echoes from outside and a mysterious hand grips the side of the door, and 3 armed raiders enter the car, smiling upon seeing they found only a defenseless girl. Outside the train, the mercenary leader desperately begs for death because of the terrible pain, and Ivan steps on the criminal's chest and calmly says with his axe in hand that he certainly won't die, and the hero tells him to stop saying scary things as he coldly brings the weapon closer to his face, and the mercenary lets out an agonized scream when the veteran starts torturing him without any mercy, and the villain begs him to stop while Ivan pours a green healing potion to prolong his suffering, and the mercenary leader screams in despair as the green liquid burns his skin intensely, and Ivan keeps pouring the potion, knowing that healing potions are the worst thing for elite soldiers, because no one understands the pain of healing better than the hero himself, who has gone through that suffering before. In his memories, young Petrov would beg in the hospital for them to just cut off his arm already, and he would shout in outrage, asking what kind of doctor treats a national treasure with such cruelty. And since that traumatic time, the protagonist always tries his best to avoid serious injuries in combat, and the terrible healing potion makes a person feel all the accumulated pain of a slow recovery at once. And after testing the cure on his own skin, Van realized it worked perfectly for interrogating criminals, and the endless cycle of healing and interrogating makes the prisoner scream in agony, begging for mercy. The mercenary cries desperately, saying he doesn't know anything else, and begs Ivan to end his life, but Ivan refuses to kill him, remembering that he's only the tutorial boss and needs to stay alive, and the veteran plan to take him back to the train, but realizes he's just a low-ranking henchman, so he focuses his gaze, suspecting that the man suffered from the criminal's memory-blocking spell, and suddenly, Ivan's battle instinct activates upon noticing a new threat approaching, and the hero tries to predict where the enemy attack will come from while calculating the trajectory of the massive projectile, and a giant rock falls from the sky at high speed, aiming directly for the soldier's face, and the projectile destroys the ground around it, raising a huge cloud of dust and debris at the impact site. The veteran realizes that using firearms against an opponent of this caliber makes no sense, so he dodges more thrown boulders, noticing that the adversary's strength is much greater than expected, and the explosions caused by the rocks devastate the battlefield, leaving everything covered in thick haze. But in the middle of the dense smoke curtain, Ivan's imposing silhouette remains standing without a scratch, and Ivan advances slowly with his eyes glowing, concluding that the enemy can also predict the line of fire, and the soldier tells the hidden adversary to show himself so he can settle this battle once and for all. Heavy footsteps echo across the field while a strong red aura begins to manifest in the smoke, and death appears on the horizon, praising Ivan's strength but warning that his fun is over, and the barbarian says it was a huge mistake for the mercenary to dare lay a single finger on his niece, and Ivan realizes his judgment error upon noticing that the giant is actually the uncle of the true game's boss. So the soldier draws his elite battle axes, preparing to fight seriously against the warrior, and the hero focuses on the adversary, thinking that this warrior must be the true leader he was looking for. Mord advances at high speed, raising his heavy weapon to deliver a mortal blow against the enemy, and the two warriors clash their weapons with brutal force, generating a devastating impact that cracks the ground, and the barbarian's eyes widen in extreme surprise upon feeling the weight and firmness of the adversary's defense, and Mord tries to push Ivan with all his brute strength, immediately realizing that soldier is too strong, and Ivan swings his axes with extreme technical agility, easily managing to nullify a power attack, and he blocks the sequence, wondering if his prediction that this was just the tutorial was wrong. The barbarian is shocked by the opponent's skill, finding it absurd that a mere raider fights so divinely, and Mord begins to suspect that there might be some much more dangerous force manipulating everything from the shadows, and sparks and dust fly everywhere with each violent clash of the two elite combatants' blades. And Ivan remembers that the young Princess Zaidi's is one of the game's protagonists he needs to keep alive, while the strong warrior Mord doubles his efforts, thinking about saving his precious niece at any cost, and he shouts with all his soul that he needs to rescue her as soon as possible to prevent the worst from happening. Far from the battle, silence reigns in the wrecked train car, where the survivors still hide, and Zaidi's retreats in terror as the armed raiders approach her with malicious intentions, and the raider leader laughs wickedly, saying he thought she was just an ordinary survivor, and he approaches smiling to touch her, but is surprised by an extremely violent reaction from the girl and apologizing to her beloved instrument. The redhead strikes the bandit's face with all her brutal strength, and the violent impact sends the man flying, breaking the car's structures with the force of the girl's blow, and the other two henchmen swallow hard and freeze in dread upon seeing their leader unconscious on the dusty floor. The young woman trembles with rage, holding her violin that ended up with small cracks from the strike, and crying with hatred. The princess screams that they damaged her violin, showing the same fury as her mother, but she also possesses the violent and fiery side of her father, known worldwide as the Butcher Einar, and the redhead cries, looking sadly at her beloved instrument, which she considered a true work of art, and the other thugs inside the car fall into total despair, shouting for everyone to flee immediately, while Zaidai's raises her broken violin as if it were a lethal weapon, concentrating enormous fury into it, and she swears to avenge her instrument, birthing there the most dangerous and strongest music student in the entire world. Outside, the fallen leader screams for help, leaving Ivan confused by all that sudden racket, and suddenly, one of the raiders is brutally thrown out of the train window, screaming in sheer terror, and the other bandits flee in panic, shouting that she's crazy, while Ivan and Mord interrupt their fight, and both warriors become worried and start shouting, asking about the young redhead's whereabouts and safety, and Ivan recoils, surprised to deduce that the man he was torturing with the potion wasn't her kidnapper, and in reality, the protagonist knows that in academy stories, a strong helper always appears to save the day. Mord lowers his axe in confusion and asks if the young man was her ally or if he was with the terrorists, and the warrior points out the fact that Ivan was pouring a healing potion on that damned criminal moments ago, but the veteran clarifies that it's just his standard interrogation method used by the extermination squad, and he says he needed to extract information, and the barbarian sighs in relief, saying he should have warned him earlier, and suddenly, Mord senses a strong murderous presence coming toward him and turns around, startled by the danger, and Zaidai's appears with a dark look and eyes glowing with hatred while firmly holding her broken violin. The uncle runs happily toward his niece, celebrating that she's alive, but the girl is confused by his presence, and Ivan observes the young woman in silence, remembering that he had seen that girl exactly 7 years ago, when she was just a cute little girl who would run happily to hug her uncle, and the soldier realizes the target is safe and that the new ally is strong enough to escort her to the academy. So he decides it's best to retreat from there, since it would be very problematic if his true identity were revealed. The redhead finds it strange upon noticing that the masked warrior who was there with them completely vanished in an instant, and Mord stares at the horizon in silence, intrigued by the mysterious abilities of that relentless fighter, and he analyzes the warrior's fighting style and concludes it was an identical copy of the enemy's special forces, and the barbarian recalls that the man's axe handling seemed very familiar to the kingdom's style, and putting the clues together, he realizes there's only one man capable of this, the legendary hero candidate Ivan Petrovich. Mord asks his niece if she remembers a man named Ivan, and she confirms very excitedly, praising Uncle Ivan, saying he was an incredibly kind and gentle person as they walked together, and Mord remembers hearing rumors that Ivan had died, but realizes he only didn't recognize him because he's bearded. Back at the orphanage, our protagonist lets out a long tired sigh after that hectic day, and he reflects on how that hard day of work was extremely exhausting relative to what he gained, and the system confirms that the first escort mission for the warrior's daughter was completed with absolute success, and the orphanage church bells ring, announcing the arrival of a new morning of calm at the institution, and Ivan reads the reports of completed missions, confirming that the young heiress arrived in complete safety, and he analyzes the other 2 hero candidates who are about to arrive and concludes he doesn't need to worry, and he checks the reports pointing out that the mage's daughter will come by airship and the other disciple is already in the capital. The hero thinks that if he stops 2 more terrorist attacks, the game's tutorial chapter will finally be finished, and with the pen in his mouth, the orphanage director begins planning the most important things he needs to do. And now he decides to write a detailed list of all the delicious foods he wants to try when he returns. And Ivan crosses out his first option of kimchi stew and decides to write in big letters that he prefers tteokbokki, and he starts salivating, remembering the unique taste of that traditional spicy dish served in school snack bars. The director softly laments that he really wants to go back home when suddenly a girl appears at the window, and Ivan gets a huge surprise and quickly turns around to see who dared to invade his private office, and the young blonde Priscilla, 17 years old, smiles, saying she heard him muttering about his favorite foods, and he is extremely shocked by the girl's audacity and asks how she managed to climb up to his office, and she boasts that she studies a lot, but Ivan seriously reminds her that the office is located on the 3rd floor, and he warns her to use the hallway next time, since climbing the building's exterior walls is very dangerous. However, there's a classic and very popular game among all the children of that old orphanage, and the game consists of trying to get as close as possible without the local director noticing their presence, and the orphanage children always try to surprise the hero by throwing things behind his back, but the veteran's sharp instincts were far too sharp for such an attack to work, because he could catch any object thrown from behind without needing to look at where it was, and moreover, he was a mysterious man capable of finding all the hidden children on the first try, and above all, his mere imposing presence in the yard left the little ones scared during playtime, and the director would comically lift the orphans by their collars while they pretended to be clueless. But despite his intimidating appearance, Ivan had a gentle personality, being their best companion, and he thought that if those children learned to deceive his senses, they would be ready for the world, and he believed they would manage on their own in the future, with 2 weeks left until the next train. The hero savored his short period of peace and absolute freedom in the orphanage's sunny yard, but all that utopian tranquility ended up going down the drain on a rainy, dark night, because Priscilla ends up kidnapped by mercenaries and warns that her director will wipe out their kind, and the kidnappers get furious and ask where that little girl learned to conceal her presence so well. And the girl smiles confidently and reveals without hesitation that her feared director's name is Ivan Petrovich, and the thugs look at each other in confusion and wonder if they've ever heard of this Ivan Petrovich, and the next second, they burst out laughing, mocking the common name the young prisoner mentioned, and the villain explains laughing that Ivan Petrovich is the most common and generic name in the entire Krashov region. Suddenly, a cold and frightening voice from the shadows tells the men to shut up immediately, and a mysterious woman appears at the scene with calm steps, asking exactly what they mentioned, and Priscilla cries in terror upon feeling the immense pressure of that new shadowy figure's icy gaze, and the woman extends her hand with red eyes glowing intensely upon hearing the orphanage director's name. At the orphanage, the veteran puts on his black overcoat, knowing that his name was the trigger for all of this, and the staff confirms Priscilla's kidnapping through tears, and Ivan replies that he remembers her very well, and he analyzes a clue left at the scene, knowing that Mark belongs to a very unpleasant person, and the hero realizes he will need to adjust his schedule to meet the person he least wanted to see in the world, and the veteran understands this kidnapping as a direct summons from his old wartime master. Ivan remembers that the elite extermination squad he served in was actually her creation, and that audacious woman had said she was going to retire, but kept acting secretly in the underworld, and she is Enrique, known as the Blade of Shadows, who led assassinations in the Kingdom's shadows, and Ivan descends into the city's southern underground channels, searching for the entrance to his master's secret dungeon, and it took him less than 3 tries to locate his old mentor's hideout for the first time. In the capital's central square, there were statues honoring the heroes and the goddess of victory from the war, but right after the conflict against the Demon King ended, the hero's monument mysteriously disappeared, and no one in the kingdom gave much importance to the theft of that statue in the middle of the capital's public courtyard. And the reason is that Enrique left a clear warning saying that mourning the fallen heroes was her right, and Ivan sees the stolen monument in the sewer, knowing they were weapons too sharp for times of peace, and he focuses his gaze on the stone, analyzing in detail the inscription carved on the stolen funerary monument, and the text says that even if forgotten, their glory will be eternal, honoring the absent heroes of Krashov. The protagonist makes a respectful bow before the monument in absolute silence as a sign of mourning, and the soldier mentally tells himself not to mourn those who left first on the cruel battlefield, and he knows very well that soon he will also be marching in the same ranks as his fallen brothers, and suddenly, the sound of a heavy iron door opening echoes through the damp and dark dungeon, and Ivan raises his head, looking at the large passage revealed right behind the stone soldier statue. And he enters the luxurious chamber and quickly turns around upon feeling the familiar presence he expected there. At the end of the long dining table, a beautiful purple-haired woman rests calmly, holding a cup, and the hero calmly says she still remembers him while facing the imposing figure of the legendary rogue, and the woman responds provocatively, asking if this is their first meeting in 7 years, and she is Enrique, the old rogue from the hero's party, who affectionately calls the soldier Little Ivan, and she was a century-old vampire who eliminated her own race and took countless lives under secret contracts, and moreover, she was the brilliant mind who created the extermination squad, being Ivan's beloved grandmaster. Enrique observes her former student with a cunning smile, noting that he hasn't even touched his coffee cup, and the veteran replies that he doesn't mind if it gets cold, since in his homeland people drink iced coffee, and he goes straight to the point, asking about Priscilla's whereabouts, and the rogue laughs, saying he never changes, and Ivan stares at his master, asking her to put aside all that unnecessary hostility, and Enrique shows her sharp vampire fangs, saying disdainfully that this posture makes him look weak, and the hero startles and rests his hand on his axe upon feeling a sudden change in the room's atmosphere, and he questions if she doesn't remember her lessons that said hostility is exclusive to prey, and the vampire warns that she hasn't bitten the little girl yet and guarantees she's in a completely safe place. Ivan feels a suffocating killing intent and visualizes a giant red serpent surrounding him, and Enrique urgently demands to know what he's really plotting by collecting and training those orphans, and the terrible aura in the form of red serpents floats through the room, pressuring the soldier to reveal his plans, and she furiously demands a clear answer about his real intentions in creating that nursery with orphans. And the rogue thought he just wanted to take care of children after retiring. Finding that attitude very cute, but seeing one of those orphans act like a professional elite agent in her backyard put her on alert, and she coldly stares at him, asking if all that bold movement was a declaration of war, and the vampire focuses with all seriousness, showing she is truly offended by Soilo's actions, and she makes a comical pout and says with discontent that she feels deeply hurt by the whole situation, and on top of everything, she finds his huge beard ridiculous, thinking, it's a terrible disguise for a hero. The soldier is confused by her unstable behavior, knowing he had no intention of fighting, and Ivan stares deeply at her, wondering how much information he really should explain to that woman, and he recalls that the kingdom seemed peaceful after the war, but was internally divided by the royal crown, and the political conflict split the crown prince, who wanted war, and Princess Elizabeth, who wanted peace. And to avoid chaos, Elizabeta used agents who faked their deaths to protect the heroes. At the university, and the veteran knows very well that this infiltrated agent is him and finds it absurd to be accused of plotting something, and he knows Enrique is aware of his mission, so he wonders why she's demanding details about the plans, and the soldier begins to suspect that his old master might have secretly allied herself with the crown prince, and he tenses up, wondering what that completely crazy and unpredictable woman is planning to do. The hero says he heard she trained a disciple and tries to resolve things peacefully, and Enrique sits with her arms crossed, wanting to know where he plans to go with all that formal talk, and Ivan explains that his client became interested in the girl and that it would be a great loss if she got hurt, and he intended to say he would take responsibility for her protection, hoping the master would understand the message. But from the vampire's perspective, his words sounded like a direct threat that he would kill her, and Ivan thinks she understood everything perfectly, but the woman slams the table furiously, feeling he threatened her, and Enrique shouts for her disciple by name, ordering the girl to enter that meeting room immediately, and the door opens and a cheerful young woman named Lucia answers her master's call with great enthusiasm, and the girl happily greets Ivan, saying she heard many wonderful things about the veteran. Ivan observes her intrigued, noticing she is human, and asks if she knows her master's true race, and the naive girl smiles with pride, readily answering that her dear master is a normal human being, and she says the vampire has a bizarre diet but a kind heart and protects the kingdom's humanity, and the veteran lets out a sound of surprise while the vampire avoids his gaze, dying of embarrassment over the situation, and the hero thinks it's rare to see someone with such an open mind after the devastating and cruel demon war, and the vampire praises her student, saying she is a much better person than them and her most precious treasure, and Enrique warns with a deadly look that she doesn't want to kill him, but will do everything to defend her precious treasure. Ivan stands up and draws his battle axes upon realizing things got out of hand between them, and he asks where her loyalty lies and whether she still supports the princess or allied herself with political enemies, and the tension between the two opposing auras breaks the room as he asks what the prince offered her, and Enrique makes a face of extreme confusion and asks if it wasn't Ivan himself who was allied with the prince, and the veteran is equally confused and replies that he has never even seen the damned heir's face in his life, and an awkward and complete silence settles in the luxurious room as the two heroes stare at each other, and they both realize there was a huge and ridiculous misunderstanding in the conversation and don't know how to react. Enrique complains that talking to Ivan is exhausting and laments that God didn't give him the gift of eloquence, and Lucia jokes that she thinks the two suit each other well, and the vampire gets extremely irritated by the comment, and the hero tries to relax, thinking he should charge the princess overtime for all that headache, but in the end he drinks his coffee relieved to know the big problem was properly resolved. And he knows that even with new dangers in the tutorial, the disciple will be safe since Enrique will protect her, and Lucia tells her master that the legendary vampire's killing intent is no joke, and seeing the two act like mother and daughter, Ivan feels that parent-master meeting ended safely, and he denies having taught ambush techniques, saying the orphans learned on their own to find jobs. After the long conversation, Ivan walks back alongside Priscilla, noticing the great distance from the location, and the director wonders why the girl came to the city center and ended up captured by the guards, and Priscilla gathers courage and calls him timidly, while the veteran listens to her attentively along the way, and the young woman looks at him with tears in her eyes, asking if he was preparing to leave, and he remembers that he's been receiving government visits and being away from the orphanage a lot lately, and Ivan thinks that his written travel plans must have made the girl believe in a definitive departure. However, the hero reflects that perhaps the real problem is something much deeper than a simple trip, and he realizes that he simply ended up letting his internal feelings of leaving show. The little girl listens in absolute silence to her beloved protector's sincere words about his departure, and she begins to cry profusely, begging the director not to abandon them in any way in that place, and the veteran understands that as a war orphan, she felt the terror of losing her only safe harbor in life, and he deduces that she sought work in the city and was mistaken for an elite spy for walking silently. And Ivan gently places his coat over her shoulders, and Priscilla asks where he was planning to go. The protagonist confesses to himself that he truly wishes to leave that other world and return to Earth, but he knows that his current responsibilities with those children prevent him from leaving immediately, and he reveals that he will only go to the university, promising that he will come back to visit them very often. So Priscilla feels relieved upon realizing that the director has dedicated so much effort to that orphanage and won't abandon them. The veteran calculates that he will need about 3 years to complete all the institution's dependencies, and knowing that the difficult university entrance exam will be in November, the young woman already begins to devise a plan, smiling as she thinks that if they all pass the test, they could meet the director again in just 1 year, and she gathers the orphans, explaining the rules that they must do everything in absolute secrecy without him knowing, and she says determinedly that they need to study hard without the director suspecting anything about their plans. So the internal competition begins, and the group that gets admitted to the university first will claim the great victory, and all the orphans enter an insane routine of intense studies while the director thinks everything is calm. The mission of keeping this particular one safe was officially completed successfully by our skilled hero, and the second mission involving Enrique's disciple was also completed successfully by the protagonist, and he focuses his gaze thoughtfully, knowing that his next challenge is already very close to starting on the train, as the imposing steam train speeds along the tracks, cutting through the region's green fields. The focus turns to an extremely elegant and polished silver sword resting inside the car, and a beautiful blonde girl named Isabel observes the landscape through the train window, holding her weapon, and she is the proud daughter of a legendary hero traveling toward the prestigious university, while a terrible shadow beast lurks on a tree branch, eyeing a tent set up in the forest, and the mad heir brutally attacks the enemies by surprise, knowing that his group acts like an assassin squad. And a massive beam of light explodes, destroying everything in the forest and mocking the need to act in secrecy, and Gilbert begins a smug and confident smile, certain that he has carried out another excellent attack. The dark elf screams furiously, saying he's completely insane for acting with such scandalous destruction, and she complains that he should just go around shouting to the whole world that the kingdom's hero was there, but suddenly, the elf hears a strange noise and quickly turns around, suspicious of a new threat, and Gilbert ignores her warnings and advances, spinning his light sword, determined not to lose to the beasts, and a spectacular show of luminous slashes destroys the giant monster, leaving the elf completely stunned, and he comments that it was a good warm-up, but the girl despairs upon noticing that his wrist is broken, and the injured warrior calmly asks for medical help while the healer lies down in the magic circle, exhausted. The barbarian king lets out a sarcastic laugh with his sharp teeth, preparing to put on a show, and he roars that drones men live to leave their mark on the world while his allies beg him to stop, and the night was incredibly starry and peaceful above that gigantic stone mountain of Krashoff, but with a single destructive swing of his axe, the barbarian split that immense stone mountain in half, and the fisher released a massive horde of monsters that emerged from the nest furious, like wasps, attacking everything. And Ivan remembers very clearly that ridiculous escape from the Demon King's army and his generals. That same night, a bright star shone intensely, cutting across the dark sky of the battlefield, and the legendary hero Maximilian proudly pointed to the sky, claiming authorship of that great feat, and he smiled radiantly, saying he had split the sky and that was exactly the kind of man he was, and the warrior Gilbert mocked, saying he split even more while boasting about having split the mountain, and they argued about the shapes of things, but Enrique told them to shut up and stop pretending. They were smart, and the hero's party was a true bunch of lunatics, and the main hero himself was the craziest of all. However, even being completely insane, the hero was the star that shone brightest on Earth. Ivan grew exhausted remembering that the hero risked splitting the night sky for no apparent reason, and Maximilian later revealed that he only did it because he wanted to see the stars, and that's why Ivan didn't like him, and that man defeated the Demon King 4 years ago and disappeared from the world without leaving any trace of contact. And even though everyone remembers the hero's legend, people are gradually forgetting the human named Maximilian. In the train car, the novice agent asks, sweating cold, if the veteran is feeling bothered by his presence, and Ivan slowly turns around and replies intimidatingly that the annoyance is actually all of them together there, and the veteran lets out a tired sigh, realizing that an extremely irritating situation has just arisen on the train, and he remembers when he returned from his last mission and his government contact was shocked by the accuracy of the data, and the agent held his hands, admiring that he had predicted the exact location and date of the terrorist attack, and he offered a counterintelligence team of 5 agents to help him on the next patrol mission, and the officer asked curiously how a retired soldier managed to create such a secret information network, but Ivan only predicted the attack based on story cliches, and to the government it seemed like he had an agency, and he knows he doesn't need to reveal the truth about his predictions, since a warrior's authority comes from mystery. However, as a direct consequence of all that misunderstanding, he ended up receiving an unwanted escort, and he was forced to take 18 amateur spies who were clearly sent only to monitor his steps. Ivan finds it absurd that the spies use identical terms and decides to put an end to that whole amateurish situation, and he points out that with so many empty seats in the car, all of them huddled in the same corner is very suspicious, and the veteran calls the agents clueless rookies, wondering how he'll ever retire with professionals like that, and he decides to give an epic scolding, saying that in their day, things were much stricter in the army, and the steam train continues its journey, releasing gray smoke into the blue sky as time passes slowly, and the iron wheels keep turning along the tracks, making the carriage sway gently during the trip. At the station, the rookies bow and tremble as they respectfully thank Ivan for his advice, and during the journey, Ivan harshly reprimanded them, teaching that Raizel agents must conceal their intentions, and the young men flee crying and exhausted from having endured 18 straight hours of being yelled at without any break, and the veteran watches the spies running away, relieved to finally have gotten rid of that surveillance. And his plan worked perfectly, giving the boys a life lesson and also an excuse to leave, and moreover, the rookies were ordered to protect the young heir Oscar, which makes things easier for the hero, and Ivan finds it perfect, since he got rid of his spies and ensured the safety of an important group member. At that moment, a beautiful blonde young woman carrying a suitcase passes right by him, walking down the train corridor, and she walks with her head down, a distant look in her eyes, seeming quite thoughtful about her own destiny, and inside her private cabin, the blonde young woman rests her face on her hand, bored, watching the journey through the window, and her butler tries to comfort her, asking her not to worry, since her father always took care of everything, but the girl reacts aggressively, slapping the young man's hand and showing enormous irritation with him, and with eyes blazing with fury, Isabel tells the servant to shut up, calling him a useless idiot, and the man tries to apologize in fright, but the young heiress coldly orders him to get out of her sight, and she calls him an imbecile while watching the young man withdraw with his head down from the luxurious train cabin, and the butler closes the door in silence, feeling sad and discouraged by his mistress's cold treatment, and the butler grits his teeth with accumulated anger as he walks away from Isabel's cabin. This train left Samedalin and carries several passengers toward the capital, and since it's a line close to the demon front lines, security in the region is enormous, and Ivan observes the landscape, thinking that most of the areas they pass through are well-guarded military zones, and because of all this surveillance from the route's 30 stations, only 3 of them are prone to attacks, and on the first stretch perfect for an ambush. The train passes peacefully without any incident, and on the second stretch susceptible to attacks from mounted bandits, the journey continues peacefully, and the veteran then places his hand under his overcoat, ready to draw his pistol at any moment. And reaching the last critical stretch, Ivan remains on maximum alert, waiting for the action to begin, and he looks around and notices that the passengers in the car continue acting completely normal, and the tense silence in the environment leaves the veteran increasingly intrigued by the lack of movement. He wonders if his prediction was wrong, since the story's tutorial should have been a terrorist attack, and he begins to fear that the previous encounter was a coincidence and that things are different, and Ivan grows furious at the terrible possibility that this world doesn't follow Academy clichés, and a terrible frustration consumes the hero, who questions whether this damned world even has an ending. And upon arriving at the last stop, people run in panic, screaming that an armed bearded man is attacking them, and he reflects whether the original hero actually didn't isolate himself but instead returned to his own world, and if the savior left, the protagonist questions the tragic fate of the abandoned world, and the hero remembers his old life in Korea and wonders what will happen to him now. And while the train releases smoke into the platform's darkness, his thoughts continue racing, and he feels immense repulsion for that place and desperately wishes to leave once and for all. And the hero misses a comfortable bed, being able to speak his own language, and playing his games, and he hates that medieval fantasy universe, where basic concepts of well-being simply don't exist, and a deep anguish takes over his mind, making him relive the despair of being trapped there. Suddenly, Ivan's gaze changes drastically upon feeling immediate danger approaching, and the illusion of his desperate reflection shatters violently like broken glass before him, and he reacts instantly, jumping backward as a devastating explosion tears through the train car, and fire consumes everything around, spreading debris and smoke throughout the vehicle's metal structure, and the enormous explosion splits the train in half, hurling the cars directly off the tracks, and the heavy structure plummets toward the ravine in complete chaos of flames and smoke, and in the middle of the disaster, young Isabel screams desperately as she's thrown by the force of the impact. Kimson's despair disappears, giving way to the cold and calculating mind of the legendary Ivan Petrovich, and with precise movements, he uses his ability to contain the fall of the 10 cars in the dark night, and focused and meticulous, he realizes that the tutorial indeed hasn't ended and his predictions were correct, and he leaps imposingly against the full moon, demonstrating total control of the situation amid the fall, and Ivan opens a savage smile, determined to reach the end of that story. By any means. The destroyed cars lie silent at the bottom of the valley, surrounded by smoke and dust after the impact, and a dense bluish haze hovers over the wreckage as the survivors begin to move, and Isabel starts to regain consciousness and lets out a groan of pain, feeling the impact's weight on her body, and she slowly opens her eyes, trying to understand the absurd destruction that just happened around her, and the blonde young woman realizes she's being supported by her injured and devoted butler. In the middle of the smoke, and she's in shock upon seeing that the young man is gravely wounded, with blood running down his neck, and the butler uses his last strength to protect her, even though he's on the verge of losing consciousness, and Isabel remembers how she always treated the servant with extreme arrogance and coldness at all times, and she can't understand the reasons why the young man sacrificed himself so much for someone who always humiliated him. The butler begs her to flee and abandon him there, revealing that the attackers were after her, and the noble calls him an idiot with tear-filled eyes, asking why he would save someone so hateful, and she says her father wouldn't care about his death and that he shouldn't have risked his life, but the young man whispers weakly that he already knew that, but still didn't hesitate to protect her from danger, and he confesses that he never wanted to call attention to the hero, but rather to fulfill his duty of protecting his daughter, and Maximilian left the faithful knight behind so he could guide and protect his precious daughter, and in the wounded knight's mind, the young noble represents the only remaining hope for a better future, and Isabel is left without understanding her ally's declaration while trying to help him stay conscious. Ivan closely watches all the young man's dedication and feels quite pressured by such loyalty, and the experienced veteran uses his brute strength to remove the heavy metal wreckage pinning the two survivors, and he asks the noble warrior's name, and the young man replies with difficulty that he is August, and when questioned about his identity, the robust veteran simply introduces himself as Ivan Petrovich, and Ivan asks if the young man wants to live, and he replies gasping that he will do everything to survive, and the experienced warrior quickly opens the flask of his special healing potion to begin treatment, and he administers the legendary green potion and seriously warns that the recovery process will be extremely painful, and despite the almost unbearable pain, August resists bravely against the potion's effect through sheer willpower, and the suffering is so absurd that the young man begs for death and promises to confess all the secrets of his order, and he screams uncontrollably, leaving the young heiress in complete shock upon witnessing that frightening scene. In the middle of the painful delirium, August aggressively lashes out at Isabel, revealing his true grievances against her, and after the outburst and the girl's restorative slap, the knight finally faints with his cheeks swollen and red, and the terrible shock of the pain and the slap made the young man regress mentally, childishly calling for his mother. And Ivan warns that the enemies from the mountain are descending and orders the girl to carry the wounded young man, and the brave heiress draws her shining sword and states with determination that she is also capable of fighting. However, her trembling hands betray the dread and weakness she feels in the face of imminent combat, and the veteran praises her posture but says it won't be necessary, and the girl complains about his lack of formality, and he comments that she inherited her mother's difficult personality, and the young woman asks in fright if he knew her father, and he changes the subject and tells the survivors to light a fire to warm themselves from the harsh night cold. Isabel questions whether he'll face the danger alone without even knowing who the mysterious invaders are, and the robust warrior calmly walks toward the dark forest, demonstrating total confidence in his actions, and he firmly repeats that the combat details are not a concern she should carry at the moment. And beneath the imposing moon, the veteran recalls the military doctrine about always preparing for the worst-case scenario, and he knows that in real combat, the simplest survival rules make all the real difference, and the enemy will always try to attack in the most cruel and complicated way possible to destabilize the targets, and the invaders' standard plan after derailing the train is to tirelessly pursue the fleeing survivors, and to avoid the worst scenario, Ivan adopts the tactic of placing the victims in exposed positions where they can be seen, and upon spotting the fire, the enemy troop changes strategy and stops the search to surround the luminous point, and while the opponents move to surround the flames, Ivan seizes the perfect moment to counterattack. The enemy soldiers run confidently with their torches, unaware of the deadly trap ahead, and Ivan coldly turns in their direction, deciding to become the worst possible nightmare for those invaders, and the bearded shooter positions his finger on the trigger, ready to deliver a devastating attack against the group, and he uses the precision technique of his old military unit to execute perfect long-distance shots. And suddenly, one of the invaders is fatally hit, leaving the companions in absolute panic, and another soldier falls wounded in the forest while the others scream desperately, trying to find the shooter, and taking advantage of the distraction caused by the gunfire, the veteran advances relentlessly through the forest shadows, and amid the forest darkness, the opponent's torches end up serving as perfect targets for his assault, and Ivan appears by surprise, brandishing his fearsome axe and eliminating the opponents with precise and brutal strikes, and one of the enemies tries to fight back in despair, pointing his firearm and screaming furiously at the hero, but the legendary warrior blocks the attack with extreme agility, disarming the adversary in the same instant, and with cold and calculated movements, Ivan neutralizes another threatening opponent without giving any chance to defend. After the quick and efficient massacre, the hero calmly sheathes his cutting weapon, and he takes a deep breath while observing all the attackers' bodies scattered across the damp forest floor, and Ivan knows that the stealth combat style of his old unit is unbeatable for dealing with dispersed groups, and that formidable strategy allows a single experienced warrior to corner an entire squadron. At the camp, the enemy leader receives the terrible news that his scouts have been decimated by axes, and the demon centurion reflects, intrigued if he's facing a highly specialized elite force. And he listens attentively to the distant bangs that seem to come from the west-north directions of the forest, and the demon realizes the shots are getting closer and wonders if the shooter knows his exact location. And to test his terrible theory, the centurion harshly orders the soldier to hand over his firearm, and he raises the pistol up and fires a single loud shot, startling the scout beside him, and the experienced centurion's eyes widen upon concluding that the adversary is actually a single person acting alone, and the subordinate finds that impossible, since everyone clearly heard multiple shots echoing in various directions. Meanwhile, in the middle of the dark forest, one of the soldiers ends up tripping over a thin, nearly invisible trapline, and the stumble activates a pistol tied to a tree that fires immediately, revealing Ivan's meticulous plan, and the centurion rages upon realizing that every sound heard earlier came from the weapons of his own fallen men. And the scout turns completely pale and perplexed upon understanding the brilliance and cruelty of that guerrilla tactic, and without giving time for any reaction, Ivan silently emerges from the shadows and attacks the warrior with extreme speed, and the villain understands that the hero tested his combat perception by using the shots as perfect bait from the start, and the soldier questions whether the hero's daughter would be capable of planning something so brilliant and frightening all alone. And the centurion remembers the deceased hero's absurd power and imagines that his daughter must also be a true monster. The centurion orders all troops to immediately gather in the forest to hunt down the invader once and for all, and he warns that he will move separately, leaving his subordinate quite surprised by that risky decision, and a solitary bird flies over the dark sky while another violent bang echoes through the vastness of that tense night, and at the camp, the survivors tremble in dread around the fire, lamenting that everyone's death is inevitable, and Isabel tries to hold back August's tears, who continues to deliriously point and laugh at the fire, and suddenly, the young heiress's beautiful green eyes widen upon feeling an overwhelming presence approaching, and the fearsome demon centurion appears imposingly before the campfire, spreading an atmosphere of absolute terror among the survivors, and he formally introduces himself as a former centurion of the Imperial Infantry, wielding a gigantic dark sword, and with a bloodthirsty look, the demon warrior demands to know if the blonde young woman is truly the famous hero's daughter. Under the cold light of the full moon, a funereal silence takes over the valley, anticipating the start of an inevitable confrontation, and meanwhile, in the dark forest, Ivan quickly calculates that the total force sent to hunt him was 50 soldiers, and the veteran firmly holds his completely blood-soaked axe after the brutal confrontations against the scouts. And he wipes the sweat from his face and calmly concludes that he managed to neutralize almost the entire enemy troop in the forest, and, satisfied with the result of that quick ambush, the warrior sheathes his preferred weapon back into his belt, but instead of calming down, the hero's thoughts become confused about the clichés and the progression of that story, and he analyzes that if this were truly a common academy tutorial, the difficulty would be absurdly high, and he remembers that young Zeitgeist's test was extremely simple, involving only a few weak kidnappers, but in Isabel's case, the initial challenge already consisted of surviving a deadly train derailment, and right after, an order of highly trained warriors appears to hunt her without any prior warning, and to make it worse, the enemy band's boss is a formidable warrior capable of using advanced combat perception, and Ivan knows that many games have forced losses, but those demons truly wanted to kill Isabel, and such an unfair event would only make sense if the powerful support character was programmed to help her. The veteran stops walking, completely shocked upon realizing that he himself has become that support, and Ivan questions whether his existence is only that of a secondary character without any importance to the plot, and he fears that he may never achieve a happy ending or return to his true world, and if he's just a supporting character, he realizes he needs to discover the reason for the high difficulty and whether Isabel would actually die, and without his interference, the fearless hero decides there's only one practical way to test the limits of the young woman's fate, so he climbs onto a high branch, observing from a distance the bright campfire light where the survivors are gathered. In the clearing, the Centurion faces Isabel, admitting that he made meticulous plans to face Maximilian's heiress, and the terrible opponent opens a sadistic smile and cruelly states that the girl is actually extremely weak, and even wounded and exhausted. Isabel refuses to retreat and prepares to fight for her life until the end, and Ivan coldly watches the scene from the top of the tree, decided not to intervene in the combat under any circumstances, and the young heiress advances with it. Swift strike that is blocked with extreme ease by the demon's sword, and the Centurion mocks her technique, saying she acts like a foolish student who only memorized combat manuals, and with gritted teeth, Isabel tells the opponent to shut up while trying to maintain balance in the fight, and the survivors fall into despair upon seeing that the savior of humanity's daughter is being easily dominated. The Centurion mocks, saying fencing only serves to pierce the blade into flesh and that her strikes are useless, and he ironically laments the fact that a legendary hero's daughter has never experienced a true real battle, and taken by fury, Isabel screams for the villain to shut up and advances with renewed determination in her eyes. However, the violent clash of weapons makes the young woman's sword be thrown high into the darkness, and disarmed and totally defenseless, the girl falls to her knees while the demon points his huge blade at her, and the Centurion laments having lost his valuable soldiers for a battle that ended up being resolved so quickly, and he taunts, saying she couldn't protect anyone, and asks if she has any last words before dying. The blonde young woman lowers her head melancholically upon remembering the immense weight of carrying the title of hero's daughter, and in her thoughts, she recalls an old piece of advice that told her never to strive to become a heroine, and she remembers that a true hero is not defined by absurd strength, but by unwavering courage, and in the memory, August recited the sacred words of the knight's oath he had taken over a decade ago, and he explained that a true knight should never try to be a hero, but rather recognize his own weakness, and even having lost his sanity because of the treatment's pain, that ancient oath remained alive in his heart, and the main rule of the Kingdom of Tales was to put oneself in the place of the defenseless and see the world through their eyes. And Isabel finally accepts Dion's advice, honestly admitting to herself that she is truly weak. When the demon delivers the fatal blow, the girl uses her own weakness as an advantage and ducks under the blade, and she knows that the true reason to wield a sword is to fairly protect those who cannot defend themselves, and the survivors watch the scene, desperately hoping that the young woman can achieve the impossible, and the Centurion is caught off guard by the girl's unexpected agility, moving like a true knight of tales, and Isabel holds the hilt of her fallen sword with both hands, applying all her remaining strength into that movement, and with a humble and precise motion, she delivers a counterattack that pierces the powerful Centurion's chest, and the refugees watch that incredible display of courage, unable to believe what just happened, and with a shining and imposing look, she raises her sword, fulfilling with honor her duty to protect people, and there, an explosion of bluish light fills the environment as she finishes the confrontation in an absolutely spectacular manner. The demon Centurion is struck by the powerful cut, unable to muster any reaction against the young woman's assault, and he spits blood, completely shocked to have been so easily defeated by the girl he judged to be weak, and Isabel maintains her firm posture, showing that humility in the face of danger was her greatest weapon to win the fight, and the final strike of her blade cut through the air with precision, sealing once and for all the fate of that terrible invader, and the villain staggers backward while the full moon's light illuminates the tragic end of the pursuer's leader in the valley, and he lets out a groan of pain followed by a weak laugh, as his blood flows abundantly across the damp ground, and the demon Centurion ironically notes that he was first wounded by the legendary hero and now by his brave daughter, and without strength to remain standing, the powerful opponent falls to his knees before the young woman, who breathes heavily, and she looks at him seriously and firmly declares that she doesn't fight just because she's the legendary savior's daughter, and she states with great pride that her name is Isabel and her strength comes from her own convictions and origins, and the demon accepts his defeat with a final whisper before collapsing lifeless on the camp's damp ground. The young heiress finally relaxes and leans on her sword, feeling the full weight of exhaustion accumulate in her body, and despite being completely exhausted and wounded, a slight and sincere smile of relief appears on Isabel's face, and the survivors celebrate, crying with joy and hugging each other for having escaped certain death that night, and suddenly, she hears a familiar voice praising her for the good work and quickly turns around, quite surprised, and Ivan calmly emerges from the forest shadows, walking toward the group with his hands in his overcoat pockets, and he stops beside the centurion's lifeless body and calmly announces that that demon was the last enemy, and relieved to know the danger has passed, the young woman praises the veteran's incredible feat and sits down to rest. Ivan concludes in his thoughts that all that brutal attack was just the classic tutorial awakening event, and he knows that if the story followed the original cliché, all the passengers and the knight would have died there, and that would have made the young woman awaken her true power of fury and eliminate all opponents alone. But the fact that everyone is alive is entirely due to his direct intervention, which would be impossible for him, and he feels enormous relief upon realizing that he is indeed not just a secondary character without control over his destiny. At that moment, Ivan recalls a striking event from the past, when the legendary hero offended the heavens, and he knows that the hero's goal in opening that dark immensity wasn't simply to contemplate, because Maximilian wanted absolute certainty that the bright morning star was still shining high in the sky. And to be quite honest, Ivan never liked the legendary hero very much, although he respected his role in that world, and even today, the memories of that smiling and confident man remained alive in everyone's memory, and Ivan gazes at Isabel, realizing that the hero's brilliance and determination continued shining through his daughter, and with his mind clear, he recalls his great goal of ensuring the safe graduation of the old hero's children, and to achieve his goal, he knows he needs to discover how the demons managed to act so close to the imperial capital, so the veteran draws the green potion, focused on uncovering who the enemy leader is and how they infiltrated the academy. And upon seeing the potion and the man's dark expression, Isabel retreats in fear, asking what he intends to do, and Ivan opens the potion flask, stating that his old military unit is very curious and will conduct an interrogation. The main character pours the healing potion, and the demon shouts, "Do you think I'll betray them just because you let me live? You vile damn humans. You think you can torture me? I'm the Centurion of His Excellency of the 6th Iron Dragon General's Guard Infantry Division. Centurion I fellows." And then the demon shouts again, "Remember me. And I won't forget you either, not even in the afterlife." Which makes the main character pause, and then the demon starts biting his own tongue as red juice starts spreading. The main character watches all this and just says, "Is it because you fought on the front lines that you still believe in such superstitions?" And then he tries to open the demon's mouth by force, saying, "Biting off your tongue doesn't kill you. People aren't that fragile. If they were, there'd be people dying just from eating all the time." And after opening it, he pours all of the potion and says, "If you can't move in the first place, the only way to die is cardiac arrest. Biting your tongue will only prolong your suffering, and I don't want you to hurt." Then, fixing his posture, our protagonist says, "Centurion, this is merely treatment, and this is healing potion." And as for the demon, he just murmurs, "Poison Spider Petrovich," and looks the main character in the eye, saying, "I heard you were dead, and this method, extermination units. I see. So that's it." The main character thinks, was he someone who operated directly on the battlefield during the war? And he asks, "Why did you come personally? Your side situation can't be so good if they can just throw someone of your caliber away as a disposable tool." And the demon replies, "Because we can't fail again," which makes the main character shout, "Fail again? Don't tell me." And after hearing that, he remembers since he neutralized the previous operation before it even began, the demon sent an executive who surely wouldn't fail, and he says, "I see. There won't be any more attacks now because you failed. This incident will be publicized as merely a terrorist attack committed by a small group of extremists, and the ones who instigated you will explain it that way to the United Kingdoms and abandon you." The demon says, "I know," and then thinks, of course, from the beginning, a thing like a thrown weapon never expected to return, regardless of success or failure, and the same happened with the extermination unit, and as he thinks that, the main character stands up and gives him 3 choices left: remain detained, be dragged to the capital Przenkova, and be under the counterintelligence command's brutal torture and magical restraints. The second choice is to be released and return home, but, of course, the counterintelligence command will tail and track him, and he'll be treated as a traitor who sided with the enemy to survive. And the last choice, as he says that, he closes his weapon to the enemy's neck, and the demon pauses a little, then speaks up. The demon says, "Though you walk through the valley of death, fear not, for I shall comfort you. I am the southern cross of the darkest night, the lighthouse of the storm-tossed sea." And with rage he says, "Stop stalling and kill me," and the main character just murmurs, "Demon King's prayer," and then asks, "Your parents still alive?" And the demon obviously doesn't get it, asking, "What the hell are you talking about?" And the main character says, "I run an orphanage," and he pauses a bit, remembering the hard times and the discharge application, and even that girl couldn't sign that. Then he immediately goes back to the present, holding the demon and saying, "If all you want is to survive, you can abandon yourself and live forgotten as though you were dead." And the demon shouts, "I don't deserve to," but the main character says, "Everyone deserves that. Loyalty and faith don't define your life. If you want, I'll break your horns. That will be the last chain binding your body. However, if you want me to, I can lower the axe a little further too. This is your final choice, to live with dignity, or to leave this world with dignity." The demon pauses a bit, thinking what to do, then after struggling, he shouts, "I want to live," and the main character says, "Good choice," and then a notification appears. Orphanage Resident Registry, registration complete, and this is I Fellows, orphan, in his 50s, from Demonkind. The main character thinks, most likely hypothesis, this world is an academy genre story, just as he hypothesized the hero's daughter Isabel was attacked. But because of him, the tutorial difficulty became absurdly high, which means the demons aren't only AIs that move according to a predetermined script, and not just them, but no one in this world is merely an NPC, impossible to predict every event, and in that case, obsessing over the process is basically meaningless, and in the end there is only one thing he needs to focus on, and that's the ending, or in other words, keeping these kids alive and getting them to graduation, because players, characters, NPCs, events, even if they all unfold in unexpected directions, that one thing must not change. As he thinks that, the girl beside him says, "Mister, if I hadn't boarded this train today, those people's families, the people who were on this train would have lived, right?" And the main character just worries a bit and says, "They probably would have." And he thinks, because they aren't some NPCs either, and then he says, 30,000 people a year, and the girl startles and asks, "What?" And he starts explaining to her that for the sole purpose of infiltrating the hero's party, that went to battlefields where defeat was certain, and died to draw the Demon King's army's attention, and that's where the casualty count comes from, and it was also a desperate measure to kill the 7 Iron Dragon generals and the Demon King, but it means 30,000 people died for the hero every year, and the hero, him, the soldiers, everyone knew that fact. Even through that, the hero smiled, even in times when hope was so scarce that they had to search the skies for the morning star. He did, because he himself had to shine as hope for everyone, and the moment he fell, the United Kingdoms would have been finished. As he points his finger, he says, "Take a look, that is the star your father bore in those days, and now it is the star you inherit." And the girl, in shock after hearing all that, asks, "Which star? There are too many. I can't see." And then her eyes widen as she looks at the sky, and the main character says, "A hero doesn't mean the strongest person, but rather, it's someone who never kneels before any burden, and never loses their smile in any moment. That is who we called a hero." And then patting her on the head, he says, "So Maximilian's daughter Isabel, raise your head high and straighten your back, rise, holding hope in your heart, and live, remembering gratitude before guilt for another's sacrifice. Prove to everyone that their sacrifice was not in vain, because the sorrowful receive pity, but those who always smile inspire admiration, just like the morning star." Isabel nods, saying she gets it, and then asks, "Any chance you'd consider shaving that beard?" And the main character replies with no. Then the scene shifts to St. Yansk University in late February, even in the chill of an early spring morning, with freshmen unable to hide their excitement and happiness and upperclassmen watching them with pitying eyes. Everyone was forming groups all across campus, and it was just an ordinary entrance ceremony, until that enormous shadow covered St. Yansk University's campus, and it was a ship, an aerial warship. and people are screaming and pointing at it, saying, "Holy shit! Isn't that thing? Kalyon's national emblem?" And one of the royal guards runs towards Her Highness, saying, "We're doomed, we're cooked." And then opening the door hard, he shouts, "Your Highness, a cow lion warship is currently above Presenkia," but she is trembling and says, "Sir, I have eyes too," and she is Elizaveta. The scene shifts to the main character walking casually on the street, thinking he needs to make sure she doesn't kill the cow lion elves, and well, Isabel and Acidicai were caught up in the train derailment, and it was practically a miracle that all of them were unharmed, and what the elves are trying to tell them in the sky right now can be summed up in one phrase: your border security is a fucking mess. We'll protect our own child. And you might think they'd never actually do that, but it was within the realm of expectation, and anyway, that warship must carry Elpihara, daughter of the elf from the hero's party, and Isabel says, "Anyway, you said you're university staff, mister?" "No, with your skills you must be a professor, right? What department are you in?" "The PE department." "It's definitely P." "No, the night department." Does St. Yansk University have an assassination curriculum too? A PE professor after all?" And the hero's daughter, Isabel, has arrived too, and after hearing the girl's words, the main character just drops the bombshell by saying, "I am a gardener at that university," and Acidicai has also arrived safely, while Lucia, Enrique's disciple, had already been in the capital from the start, and while the main character is leading Isabel in the background, 3 girls are flirting with Oscar, saying, "Let's go in together, Oscar," and the main character has just confirmed the arrival of Oscar, Gillis Vert's son too, and all the children of the hero's party members have arrived safely at the academy. The main character asks, "Entrance ceremony is in the grand auditorium?" And internally he thinks, then he should prepare for what's next, because at an entrance ceremony in the academy genre story, something unexpected is always bound to happen. It is the typical plot, right? And then someone in the crowd with a white coat says, "What the hell is this?" And in front of him, a status window appears and congratulates him.